Okay, hi everyone. So you're welcome to another class. This is our fourth week, class 8. And as always, I'm excited for us to learn some new stuff. Just to go over the things that we'll be covering today. So in today's class, we'll review logical operators. We spoke briefly about that last week. On Tuesday, we'll review conditionals, we'll review JavaScript functions, we'll learn about loops, we'll learn string methods, and we'll learn arrays. So we have a lot of good stuff to get into today. As always, before we begin, if anyone has any questions from last class or live, we'll give it a few minutes. Please feel free to ask if you have any questions. Okay, cool. If there are no questions, we'll just jump right into it. So just a few things to go over before we begin. So last week, Saturday around this time, we had some homework assigned. It is due next week. So if you haven't had the chance to get to it, I'd advise that you kindly do. You can find all the links on the class page, or you can just refer to the previous emails. So homework is due next week, Saturday. And I mean, just before we go into today's stuff, I know that not everything might fully make sense at the moment. I'm sure there might be things in HTML that you're still struggling with. There are things in CSS that you're still struggling with. And obviously, there will be things in JavaScript that you're still struggling with. And that is totally fine. I mean, I don't expect everything to make sense immediately. But then, like we said, the thing is to just keep practicing, to keep learning, keep adding more things to your tool belt. I guess things start to make sense over time. The more you use them, the more you have like that aha moments that, oh, this is what this is doing. Oh, this is what this is doing. So, I mean, it's totally fine if things don't entirely make sense right now. Just keep coming to class, keep reading the assigned materials, keep practicing, keep writing code. As always, I always say that the only way to get better at writing code is to write more code, not to watch a lot of YouTube videos or tutorials and stuff like that. You don't want to be stuck in tutorial hell. So, yes. So in our last class, we spoke about logical operators. We said we referenced three logical operators. The first one we spoke about was the OR operator. And we said it returns true if either of its operands is true and false otherwise. So for example, if we wanted to run this, it'll check if any of this is true, then it'll run the console log. As long as one of the conditions is true, it'll run the console log. So with the logical operator, it just checks if any of the operands are true. I hope that made sense. The next thing we spoke about was we spoke about the AND operator. We said for the AND operator, is for the AND operator to run, both conditions have to be true. So the difference between the OR is that all, as long as any of the conditions is true, or still run what we had in our if block. But for AND, both of them have to be true. So in this instance, X has to be greater than 10, X has to be greater than 0, and Y has to be greater than 0. So it'll run because this is 5 and this is 10. So for the AND logical operator, both operands have to be true. Now, after the logical operators, we spoke about conditionals, and we said sometimes we need to do something based on different conditions. And the way we can do that is to use what we call conditionals. So we looked at the if, and we looked at the else, and we looked at how we could have optional else ifs. So if condition is true, do something. So we said that we could have multiple statements. So if condition is true, do something. We could also check if this is not true, we could check for something else. Then if both of these are not true, we have something that we run. So we could test out different variants of a condition and do something based on if they are true or false. So those are conditionals. So we had this access allowed. So we have the user enter their age, and if their age was greater than 18, we allow them access. Else, if their age was, I mean, if their age wasn't greater than 18, it means their age is obviously less than 18, so then we deny them access. We also, let me know. So the conditionals and logical operators, are we all feeling good about it? If you're feeling good, give me a thumbs up. I mean, this is just a review of what we did last week, but give me a thumbs up if it makes sense. Okay, thank you. We also spoke about functions. We said sometimes we can group related code so that we can use them over and over without having to repeat ourselves. And the way we do that is we can use functions. So we said functions are a simple set of instructions. And so the way we write functions is first, you have the function keyword, then you have the name of you want to give to your function, and you can pass in any parameters that you want. And if you want to use the function, you use the name of the function, then whichever arguments you want to pass into it. So we had an example. We didn't have any example, but maybe we can just quickly rewrite that. So for example, if we wanted to do a function, we could have the function and then we could give it maybe add something. Then we wanted to add two things. So we can say A and B. And we can see that when we run this function, what we wanted to do is we wanted to log the addition of A plus B. So this will be our function. And to use our function, we have to do what we call it. We have to call the function. So we can call it add something. And then we pass in the arguments we want to use. So in this instance, if we wanted to do A, 2, and 3, we pass that in. And then when we save it, it should log 1 plus 2. So that is an example of a function. That's an example of a function. Okay. Now, the other thing we didn't talk about, there's another way to write functions. This is more of a newer syntax. It's called arrow function. Now, arrow functions were introduced as part of ES6 or ES 2015. So the new additions to JavaScript that came in 2015. And we have what we call the arrow function. So with the arrow function, you can write a function without using the function keyword. So it's more succinct, where it's more simpler to write. But then the recommendation is you don't use arrow functions for everything because there are some limitations. But just to note, an arrow function is another way to write functions. So in our same example, if you wanted to write an arrow function for this, because I can't call it arrow function, I can't call it add something again. So let's say const add something. So for add something with this app, so again, the way you do an arrow function is you have the name of the function, then you have the parameter. So the only difference is you don't have to have the function keyword here. We are just assigning a function into a variable called add something. These are the parameters that we are taking. So we're taking the same A and B, then we are adding it. The thing about arrow functions is arrow functions is when they're on the same line, we don't need the curly braces like the way we do here. So we could just have everything on the same line. But if we have multiple conditions, then we could bring back the braces like this and have them inside. So arrow functions are another way to write functions. So it's just something that is good to know. I mean, you could use any of them. Most times you can just use this function keyword, but sometimes you could just use like an arrow function and just declare what you want to declare. So it's the same thing. So it's just another way to write functions. Okay. So I don't think we got into this last week, but then now we want to talk about loops. So there are sometimes when we want to do the same thing over and over again. So if we want to do the same thing over and over again, just so that we don't have to keep writing it the number of times that we want to do it, we can use loops. So loops are a way that we can repeat the same code a multiple of times. Now there are two kinds of loops primarily. There's the while loop and there's the for loop. The while loop is essentially you have the while keyword, you have your condition, then you have the code you want to run. So it's just the while keyword, the condition, and the code you want to run. So in this example, we are saying that let I equal 0. So while I is less than 3, we want to do something. So if we were to run it, and I could come out of this and we do a while loop. So, or just, let me just write in my ID. So let's keep this and let's have this. So let's say we wanted to do something. So we wanted to write, hello world. If we wanted to write hello world 10 times, one way we could do it was we could declare a variable const say hello, const say hello and do hello world. And then we could console.log hello world 10 times. So we could do console.log and we could say hello. And we could run this 10 times. So, not to waste time, I'll run it 10 times, but I'll just run it a few times. So if we save this and we run it, and for anyone who just joined, we just got into new materials. We're learning about loops. And we are first of all talking about while loop. But just before we talk about while loop, we are learning why we might need to use a while loop. So in this example, we are saying that if we wanted to say hello world 10 times, the very long way to do will be to maybe right now we just want to print out hello world. So if we wanted to print out hello world, we could print it out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, as many times as we want to. So let me run this and let me see what file am I in. And if I run this, I hope I'm in the right file. Okay, I'm not. Okay, I'm in JS. Okay, now I can run it. So if we run this, we can see that hello world has come 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But this is a very long way to do it. So it's unnecessary. So that's how loops come in. So the first one we're talking about is while loop, if we want to do something. So while loop, the way we write a while loop is, first of all, we initialize the variable, then we have the condition, and then what we want to do. So if we put this into practice, for example, in the same example, if we wanted to say hello world, so our first thing would be to initialize the variable. So let's say I is equal to 1, and we can say, while I is less than maybe 5, then what we want to do is we want to console.log say hello. And then what we want to do is every time this runs, we want to increment our counter by 1, else it will just be running because it means I will always be 1. So the first time when it runs, we want to continuously do maybe I is equal to I plus 1. What this means is that every time it runs, we want to add 1 to I. Else if we don't add anything, what it means is that every time it runs, I will still be 1 because then we are not increasing it. So then it'll keep running. It'll go into what we call an infinite loop where it'll run, so it will never stop. Because then what it means is that I will always be less than 1. So to avoid that, we add what should happen every time the code runs. So in this instance, every time the code runs, we want to increment we want to increment I by 1 so that we don't run into a while loop. Now, this is the way to do it, but a simpler way to do it, you could do I plus plus, which means just add 1 to I. But just so it's not confusing, I'll just do I plus 1. So if we run this thing, we can see that we are getting the same thing, 1, 2, 3, 4. So while I is less than, we can run it. Any questions? Okay, so that is while loop. So the main thing to note about while loops is first you initialize a variable, then you have the while loop, then you in the code block what you want to happen when the while loop runs. Now the mistake you obviously make is you probably not add a count, you probably not add an increment, so your loop will always be running because this condition will never be met. So always don't forget to add like an increment so that every time it runs, now the first time this runs, now your I will become 1. When it runs again, your I will become 2. When it runs again, it will become, it'll stop at 2 because we said while this is less than 3. So the only thing to always note for a while loop is to always add an increment, else you run into what you call a while loop. At first, when you run into a while loop, it could run out to your computer shuts down, but now there are implementations in your browser to stop your computer from like infinite while loop and shutting down. So the browser has a way of stopping it. But just so you don't run into that error every time, just don't forget to add an increment. So this is a while loop. By the way, can you guys hear any background noise? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear background noise. Or give me a thumbs down if you can't hear any background noise. I want to be sure. Is there a yes or no? Okay, great. Now the other way of doing a loop is what we call a for loop. So for loops are probably what you use the most. So for loop is also the same thing. So first you have where to begin from, what the condition is, and how much you want to increase every time the loop runs. So in this example, so in the same example we just did, so I can comment this out and we want to say hello. So the first way you do a for, you open a bracket, then just so that you don't forget, this is for the code itself. So the first thing in the for loop is what you initialize your variable. So you do for in the same example, the way we had let I equals 0 outside for the while loop, we can do let I equals 0. So this is our first condition. This is our variable. We are initializing the variable. Now the next thing is the condition. So the same way we had, so we want to keep running this loop. In what cases do we want to keep running this loop? So we want to keep running this loop while I is less than maybe 5. And it could be anything. It doesn't need to be I. So it could be maybe Tom. I mean, you can call it anything you want to call it. It doesn't matter. So you can call it Tom. But then, I mean, you don't want to have weird names. So the first condition is you initializing your variable. The next thing is the condition. And the last thing is what you want to do every time the loop runs. So every time the loop runs, we want to increment it by 1. So we do I plus plus, or you could do I is equal to I plus 1. It's the same thing, but I just like to do I plus plus. So just to step through it again, the first one is the condition. And so the first one is where we are beginning. So we are beginning at I equals 0. The first one is we are beginning at I equals 0. Then the condition. So while I is less than maybe 5, then we want to increment it by 1. So to look to the code. So for I is equal to 0, while I is less than 5, we want to increment it. So every time the loop runs, we want to add 1 to it. So we could still do the same thing and do console.log say hello. So if we run this, let me clear this. If we run this, the same way we can see the hello world. So it starts first time it will run. What is I? So when it runs the first time, I is 0. Now when it runs the second time, now I is 1. It'll check. Is I less than 5? No. So it'll run the second time. So this is the beginning. So this is the beginning. It's running when is equal to 0. So it will run. And the next time it runs, because we are incrementing it now, I becomes 1. So we'll check. Is I less than 5? No. So it'll run again. The next time it runs, I becomes 2. I becomes 2. I'll check again. Is I less than 5? No. Then I'll run again. Now I will become 3. I'll check again. Is I less than 5? No. I'll run again. Now I is 4. Is I less than 5? Then I'll stop. So we can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So first, because we started at 0, when it runs, first time I is 0. Second time I is 1. Third time I is 2. Fourth time I is 3. Last time I is 4. So now it's the next time it runs, I will be greater than 5. So then it won't run. So it'll keep running until this condition is met. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, it does.
Okay, great. If anybody has any questions to, I'll open up chat. You can always throw it in chat. So there are two ways we can do a loop, at least for now. As we go on, we'll learn more loops. But then these are the traditional ways of doing it. You have the while loop. While loop, you initialize the counter outside. Then you give the condition here. Then you increment it inside the loop. For the for loop, you have for the for loop, you have the beginning. So where you want to start from, the condition. So while I is less than something or while I is greater than something, and how much you want to step every time the loop runs. So what you want to do every time the loop runs. Most times you just want to increment your counter every time the loop runs. Okay, so if you're able to grab the starter materials before class, it's just going over all the things that we've covered so far as in last class and today. So thumbs up if you're in a position to code. Thumbs up or thumbs down. Thumbs up if you're in a position to code. Thumbs down if you're not in a position to code. Okay, the rest of us. Uh, the rest of us, can I see either thumbs up or thumbs down so that I know if we should all just do it together? Okay. Okay. I'm gonna say it's in 5 minutes. How about the rest of us? Can I see a thumbs up or thumbs down just so I know where everybody's at? Okay, I don't know if the rest can hear me. Okay, so I mean, what we can do is let's do it together, but then you guys will lead the way. So I mean, you tell me what to do, then I'll just be the hands. So you guys will be the brain. I'm happy to be the hands. So the first one is, I mean, we've learned variables. The first one says we should create a variable and console log the value. So how will we go about it? So, I mean, you can type in chat, you can come off mute. Let's try and get through this quickly so that we can, it's just revision for all the things we've covered. So how will we go about, I hope you can still see my screen. How will we go about declaring a variable and then console logging the value? Hey, why is everybody quiet? Are you guys, are the rest of you with us? I mean, I know Amma, I said the rest of you, are you with us? Are you with us or you're against us? Okay, it seems that the rest of Everybody else is against us. So what I'll do is I'll leave this. I added it to the class materials so you can go over it. I was hoping that we'll do it together so that if you had any questions, we could answer. But since I'm not getting any response, I would assume that it means you can do it by yourself. So I'll leave this. It's in the class materials. You can go over it and try and do it in your own time. Any questions? Any questions so far? Okay, great. The rest of you, are you here? Because I'm not hearing anything. I'm not seeing anything. It's primarily only Amma. Kobna, can you hear me? Okay, private message, yeah. Okay, but please, I mean, I know you've sent me a private message, but let me get some response when I ask questions, just so I know that you guys are following. Okay, I'd appreciate that. Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you. So I mean, just quickly, uh, maybe I mean you can do this on your own time, but another thing I wanted us to do was I wanted us to use the knowledge that we had learned to build out a simple rock paper scissors game. So I mean we can do that. This you can do on your own, or I might maybe when you're settled in 5 minutes, and we can all go over it. So with the same logic, we'll try and build out a simple rock paper scissors game. In rock paper scissors, it's just simple logic. The first thing is I think rock paper beats rock. So paper, I think this is the simple logic. So paper beats rock, rock beats scissors, scissors beats paper. Uh yes. Yes. I guess this is except I'm missing something. So I think if you rock beats paper, yes, I think this is the logic. Rock beats paper, paper beats scissors. So just three things. So with the knowledge that we have learned, we are going to try to build out a simple rock paper scissors game where we get users to enter their users to enter their selection, and based on what they enter, we can alert if they have won or they have lost. So just to do a pseudocode, the first thing we want to do is we want to initialize. So we want to initialize a variable for player one and player two. So we are getting player one and player two's input. Now, after we get their input, what we want to do is we want to compare their inputs. So we want to, or let's just call it selection. We want to compare their selections. And then what we want to do with their selections is we want to check if player one, if player one is paper and player two is scissors, player one is paper, or player one chooses, if player one chooses paper and player two chooses chooses if player one chooses paper and player two chooses rock, player one wins. Because we said that paper beats rock. So we just want to compare if player one chooses paper and player two chooses rock, player one wins. And it's just the opposite thing. If player so and vice versa. So not to be and vice versa. So if player two was the one to choose, if player two was the one to choose paper and player one was the one to choose rock, player one wins. So we do this for all the conditions. So the very first thing is we can say const player one. So just to give a good variable, so player one is equal to, and let's just do a simple prompt to get what's your enter. So enter your selection, rock, paper, or scissors. Please, if you have any questions whilst we are writing this, let me know. Or if not, if something doesn't make sense. So we're asking player one what is the, and we can copy the same thing and do that and have that for player two. So we can ask player two the same thing. Now, what we want to do is that after we have gotten their selections, we want to compare. So we want to use the conditionals. So we want to compare. So we can do if player one is equal to, like the way we said. So we're comparing the variable. So what will happen is that whatever they enter will be stored in this variable. So when we store the things in the variable, now we can compare it. So if player one is equal to rock and player two, player two is equal to, if player one is equal to rock and player two is equal to paper. I mean, maybe I should have done it the opposite way. And player two is equal to paper. Then we can, let's just do a simple alert. We can alert player. So who is winning in this instance? Player two is winning, right? I think paper beats rock. Player two wins. So we can, this is the first, then we can also check else if, so just so that I don't write the same thing again, I can just copy. So that will be quick. So I can just copy. But this time we have to reverse it. So if player two was the one who did the rock and player one did paper, then we can say that player who is winning, player one has won. So we can alert player one wins. So I guess that satisfies it for the first one. So if player one did rock and player two did paper, from the thing we have here, it means that player two has won. But if it was player two who did rocks and player one did paper, it means that player one has won. So then we can do this for all the conditions. So just so that it doesn't take long, I'll just copy. So we can have multiple else ifs. I mean, there are different ways we can do this, but just so this is our first way of doing like conditional. So let me just go the hard way and just type everything. So if player, and let me just copy these things and just change the values. So if player one is equal to rock, we've done, if player one is equal to rock and player two is equal to scissors. So we're using and because both of them have to be true. So it has to be that the player one has chosen rock and the player two has chosen scissors. That is the only time when one of them will win, because then we said we use and if both of them have to be true. So in this instance, it has to be that player one chose rock and player two chose scissors. That's the only reason why player one will win. So we can just alert. So in this instance, the person with the rock is winning. So we can alert player one. Maybe I should have, okay, player one went. And we can have another else if, like I'm saying, there's cleaner ways to do this, but just because it's our first run through. But if player one was the one who chose, if player one chose scissors, scissors, and player two chose rock, then it will be player 2 that won. So we can alert player 2 won. And then the last one will be to check else if. So we can check if the only one we've not done is scissors and paper. So we can check if one of them is scissors, one of them is paper. So I can paste if player 2 is scissors and player 1 is paper. If player 2 is scissors and player 1 is paper, then player 1 wins. Alert player 1. Hey, please, does it make sense so far? Or should I go over anything? Please give me a thumbs up if it makes sense or if you like me to go over anything. Okay. So I mean, let me just finish this and we can run over it. So this, then alert player who is winning in this case, player 2. Player 2 wins. And we can have an else. So we can just do an else. So if all of these conditions are not true, the obvious thing is that it's probably a draw. So we can alert it is a draw. Now, any questions before I quickly run this? Then we can all try and play and see if our game is working. Any questions before I run it? 1 second. Okay, so let me just quickly run this. Before that, I just want to open up something quickly. Let me open it in my browser. Okay, so if I open this in my browser, okay. Okay, so if I open this in my browser, it'll ask me what is my selection. So I'm player 1, so I can do rock. Let's finish loading. It's taking really a long time to load. Let me see. Okay, then it says player 2, so you can say player 2. My selection is paper. In this instance, player 2 is supposed to win because we said that paper beats rock. So when we alert this, we can see that it says player 2 wins. Now let's try it again. If we did rock and we gave player 2 to rock, we expect that it should alert a draw because rock and rock is a draw. So we can see that it is alerting a draw. So just to quickly look over it again. So we're just using the conditionals that we learned. Now there's another way I could obviously write this. I could use switch cases, but I want us to have a hard look of how we could use conditionals. So all we are doing is first we are initializing two variables. So we are prompting the user to enter. So maybe just to make it cleaner, we could do so that it's separate. We could do player 1. And obviously, if you wanted to do some styling and make it an actual game, you could like make it a game and use some CSS to style it and all those things. So player 2. So if I check this again, just so that every time it runs, you know which player. So now it says player 1, enter your selection. Okay. So just to look over it, first off, we are getting the user to enter something. We are storing that in variables. So we are storing the first person zone in a variable called player 1. We are storing the second person zone in a variable called player 2. Now, after we've gotten those, we are comparing them. So we are using conditionals. We are saying that if player one, what player one said was a rock, and what player two said was paper, then it means that player two has won. So then we'll alert that player two wins. Then we are checking. So if this is not true, we want to check something else. So we can check. So if the first condition is not true, what we want to check is, did player two select rock and player one select paper? Then it's player one that has won. If that is not true, then check, did player one select rock and player two select scissors? If so, then player one is the one who won. So then we alert player one wins. If that is not true, then we want to check for this. If this is not true, please check for this. If that one too is not true, check for this. If you check through all these conditions and none of them is true, then the obvious thing is that then they both selected the same thing because we didn't write a conditional for that. So the obvious thing is that it means that both of them selected the same thing. So then what you want to do is you want to alert it is a draw. Does that make sense? So that is how we can use conditionals and variables to build simple things like this. Okay. Any questions? Now there's what we call switch cases. So usually when you have a lot of else and if else's, sometimes doing it like this can become burdensome. So that's what you call the switch case. But not to worry, I just want to show you. You don't have to worry about it. So let me comment out this place. So it's just the same thing. And then, so now I'm just using a function just to also show you how we can do it with the function. So I have a function where I'm taking inputs from player one and I'm taking inputs from player two. So then I'm saying that whatever the player enters, check if it is rock. It's just, I mean, this is just another way to do it. So how you could use a function. I'll share this code after for anybody who wants to look at it. But then, I mean, for first pass, this is what you should be able to do because this should make sense, at least a little. I mean, it shouldn't fully make sense, but just from your knowledge of variables and conditionals, you should see how you could possibly do this. Any questions? Okay, so we're done playing again. It's a draw. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So before we jump into, okay, I guess we can go over string methods, then we can take our break. So any questions so far? Does it make sense? Do we understand? I mean, what we just did is just combining everything that we've spoken about, variables, conditionals, things like that. So does it make sense? Any questions? Before we quickly look over string properties, then we take a break. Okay, so when we spoke about strings, we said strings were a sequence of characters. So usually when we want to navigate stuff, when we have a sequence of text and things like that, we will put them in a string. Now there are different things we can do with strings. We call them string properties and string methods. So the very first thing is, before we go on, I just wanted to show you how you could concatenate strings. So when we say concatenate, it's how you can put strings together. So in this example, let's say we had, let's say we had, uh, let's say we had a name, or just so that it's even cleaner, let me delete these switch cases. Let me get rid of this. Okay. So, and so many things. Maybe I should just make a new JS file. Okay, let me just make a new one. I'm trying not to delete it just so that if anybody wants to take a look at it later. So let's say we want to get a user's name. So we could do like maybe prompt. So prompt is just an easy way to do it. I mean, if you wanted to do HTML and get the value, I mean, the more we go on, we'll learn about how to get things that people enter and use it. But this one is just like a quick browser way to get response. So let's say prompt enter your name. So we're getting the user to enter their name and want to store it in a variable. So after they give us their names, maybe we want to welcome them. So we want to do alert, hello, whatever name they give us. So the way we can do it is there are two ways we call it concatenate string. So put something together. So I want to be like, hello, then I want to welcome whatever name they put me. I want to actually use their name. So then because their name will be stored in this variable, when they enter their name, I want to welcome them. So I can concatenate this. So hello, then you could use what we call just the regular concatenation of using a plus sign. Then maybe we leave a space, then we can add the name. So in this instance, what we are saying is I want to merge hello, add a space, and whatever name they give us. Let me just do name of person. Uh, Name of person. So we are saying that when they enter their name, whatever they give us, we want to add hello to it. So this is we are concatenating it. We are adding hello, we are adding a space, the name of person. So if we were to run this, if I refresh, okay, let me just open in the browser again. If we open this in our browser, it says enter your name. So if I enter my name as Tom, we can see that now it says hello, Tom. So then we're able to get the name of what the person is entering and we're able to concatenate it and merge it with whatever string you want to add it. So that's one of the ways. Now, the other way you can do this, which is probably simpler, is what you call like a template literal. So a template literal is just the same thing. It's just big words for backtick. So on your keyboard, just next to one, there's what we call the tilde, and there's this thing called the backticks. It's just like a reverse quotation mark. It's called the backtick. It's before one on your keyboard. So what you can do is the same thing. We can alert when we do a literal. What it allows us to do is it allows us to directly type variables in our string, and we're able to use it. So just the way I was doing hello plus space and things like that, I could just type hello, leave the space I want to leave. So I can literally type what I want. Then if I want to add a variable, I just do $sign and I open a curly braces and I just put the name of my variable, which is name of person. So the difference is with the literal, you can type what you want to type without having to do it this way. So it's much more cleaner than having to concatenate this way. In a lot of languages, this is how you concatenate, like Python and stuff like that. But you can do in Python, you can do an F string, but in JavaScript, you can do an object literal. So all you do is you open a backtick, you type the string you want to type, and in places where you want to directly input a variable, so you have some variable with a value that you want to use the value directly, you use the $sign, and then you open curly braces and the name of your variable. So if we were to run this, and let's refresh the page again, and it says, hello, what is your name? And my name is, let's say, Amma. If I save, I can see that it says, hello, Amma. So that is just something that I want to mention, how you can concatenate things. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, or anyone would like me to go over it? Okay, makes sense. So those are ways you can concatenate strings. So if you have variables that you want to use later on. So Kobna said I should go over. So we are saying that sometimes, so for example, if I had, let's say, let's age equals 23 because I'm 23, and let's name equals maybe Tom. I wanted to concatenate them. So we wanted to maybe use both of them together. What we can do is we can concatenate them. So we can say maybe const, let's just save this in a variable const person. So we could do a string because it's a string. So we can do my name is, then we can do a bracket, then we can write the variable we want to use. So my name is name because we've stored the name in the variable, and I then we could, so we could do it like this, and I am. but we actually have to add space. So if we run this, and let me just run this here. If we run this, okay, let me console the log it. So let's console the log person. If I console the log person and I run it, we can see that it says my name is Tom, and so I actually have to add space. So if you are doing like concatenations like this, you have to like manually add. If you want space, you add space. If you want anything, you add it. So and I want maybe a space. Okay, maybe I just need one space, so I can just add a space here. So if we run this, we can see that it says my name is Tom and I am. So we can use the things that we can use the variables in our string. A cleaner way to do this is just to take the same thing. So let me comment this out. But then we can use what we call literals. So maybe const person. I said the way you do that is use a backtick. So the thing next to the one on your keyboard. So we could manually type out the string, my name is, and wherever we wanted to insert the variable, we use what we call the $sign and we put the name of the variable here. So my name is, and I am, so age. So if we run this, we should still get the same, as always. I just want to see it so I can console the log. So if we run this, we can see that my name is Tom because the value for name is Tom and I am 23. So that's a way you can concatenate strings. I hope that makes sense. So we're at the top of the hour, so we'll just take a break and then I'll see you all in 5 minutes. So I'll just go ahead and start the timer. If you have any questions, you can save them. When we get back from the break, you can ask. So drag this here. Okay, so I'll see you all after the break. Okay, hi, welcome back, everyone. So I just quickly wanted to mention every time before I'm able to run my code, if I want to run it in the browser, I use the HTML. So I have a link here, then I open it in the browser. So when I open it, then I'm able to run whichever code I need. So just a reminder if you have forgotten. Okay, so how are we feeling so far? Give me thumbs up if I don't know if you can give me middle thumbs if things are making sense more. Thumbs up if you are good and thumbs down if you are feeling okay. Kobna, I'm not sure what that means. Do you have a question? Okay, I don't think he has a question. I think it's a reaction. So just to quickly go over this is one of the ways you can concatenate strings. So you can do the regular concatenation where you do use the plus sign to put together things that you want to put together. The things you want to put together. Or you can use the template literals, which is the backticks. So when you use the backticks, then you can write your string, but if you want to use a variable, you can directly input your variable using the dollar sign and the curly brace. So I hope you're feeling good about that. Now, most times, most of the work you do, you need to access some properties of strings and stuff like that. So thankfully, there are a lot of string methods and properties. When we say a method is just a function that comes with a string. So in JavaScript, there are already some methods. There are already some functions that are written for strings. So the way you usually call those is you have the parentheses. The same way we are calling out the functions we add parentheses. So there's the length. So if, and maybe we can, there's the dot length. Let me just, maybe as we mentioned them, we can test them. So there's the dot length can return the length of a string. So if we had, maybe, we are using too many names. So let's say if we had, I don't know, maybe color. If we had a color, and as we call the color blue, green, and we wanted to check the length of the color, we can do that in JavaScript. There's the dot length property that comes with strings, or we can check the lengths of strings. So if we console the log, if we log out the color dot length, and if I run this, we can see that the length is 9. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we can check the length of strings using the dot length property. We can also convert everything to lowercase. So there are times when, for example, when we wrote in this code, when we did the rock, paper, scissors, we were making it, I was directly checking for rock, ROCK, but there are sometimes when maybe when the person was entering them, they made it small r. By default, it won't be the same because I'm explicitly setting this to be a capital R. So usually for data like that, you want to like maybe convert everything to lowercase. So maybe I'll change all my things to lowercase. And then when the user enters, I can say that I should, whatever they enter, I want to make all lowercase. So for this example, I could make to lowercase or convert everything to lowercase. And for methods, you always add the parentheses at the end. So if you run this, we can see that it makes now we get everything in small letters. So sometimes that's the way you sort of sanitize data before you can compare. Like I was saying in this example, because I'm doing ROCK, capital ROCK, the person actually has to enter capital R, small o, CK before it will match. But then maybe the user might not know like that. So what I can do is I can convert all the user's input to lowercase. Then all my conditionals, I could also make it lowercase so that it could match. So in the same like there's also to uppercase if you want to make everything uppercase. So if we do to upper uh, to upper case. If we run this, it should make everything uppercase. So these are some methods and properties. I mean, most times depends on what you are doing. There's also .include, so you can check if a string contains another string. So for example, if I had, let's say, let me use my name because my name contains con. So let's say name is equal to Cornelius, and I wanted to check if there was something in the name, so I could check. Let me console.log, and I'm only console.logging so that we can see. We can check if name dot includes. We can check if name dot includes con. So I'll return a boolean if it does. So if we run this, let me comment out these ones. If we run, so we're checking if the name includes this. So if we run it, it says true because the name dot includes. If the name didn't include it, so maybe it's Tim. Checking if name dot includes Tim. If we run this, we can see that it returns false. So there are ways we can check if there's something in a string by using the dot includes method. I mean, there are so many methods. Usually, I mean, I don't know all the methods of it. Usually when I'm doing something, then I mean, there are use cases I run into where I don't know a method for, then I can check it, the MD, and if there's a method for doing that. So you don't have to have every method of it. I mean, I usually use these ones, the substring. So there's a way where you can take out a part of a string. So you can essentially like slice out a string. So for example, I could do name.substring. So I wanted to slice out a part of the string substring. So then you give it a starting position. And the thing is, most things in programming in particular, most things we start counting from 0. We don't start counting from 1. So if I was counting Cornelius, C is in what you call position 0. C is not, even though it's the first one, C is in position 0. O is in position 1. So usually start counting from 0. So if we wanted to get the substring, we can give it a start index and an end index. So we wanted to get the part of maybe let's say 4 and 7. I don't know what is 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 3. But let's just console log. Let's see what we get. So if I run this, and so we get ELUI. So what is in the 4th position? 1, 2, 3, 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 is the E. Then what is in the 8th position is the U. So you can take things out of a string using the substring method. Like I'm saying, there are so many methods. You don't have to have all of it. But the more you use them, the more you learn about others. I mean, there are so many that you probably never have to use. But I mean, there are some that you run into cases where you need them. So I mean, I added a link here for anybody who wants to just have a brief overview of like all the string methods that we have. So string methods are just ways that we can do some operations on strings. We can make them uppercase. We can slice them if we wanted to check things. For example, a simple way you can do like a search. If you wanted to a user to be able to search, you can filter things. One second. So if you wanted a user to search for things, you can filter them based on like if they include something. So like for example, if a user is searching something and I want to pop up all the things that include a particular thing, I could do that. If what they are searching includes maybe CER, then you can bring out all the words that have CER for them and things like that. You can see usually when you are searching for things, when you enter like the first few words, like even on your phone when you're texting, when you type maybe BER, it brings out words that have BER and things like that. The way you do that is you use like dot include. So you check if it includes this or that. Yeah, so you can find more in the MD and I'll share the slides after class. Now, the next big topic that we want to talk about is arrays. But before that, any questions? Okay. So okay, no question. So the way we've been doing things most times is when we are storing things, we store them in a variable. So we are storing everything in a variable. And it can get very hard to constantly be storing things in new variables because there are sometimes when there are things like they are related and want to store all of them together. I mean, like in this example, if we wanted to store movies, we could of course store movie one, movie two, movie three, movie four. But if we had a lot of movies, it would be hard to like consistently be storing all of them in variables. Thankfully, there's a way that we can get around them. So instead of storing everything in an independent variable, we can use what we call an array. So our array allows us to store a collection of elements in the same place. So we can store different things in the same place. So like I'm saying, arrays help us overcome the challenge of having to store everything in a separate variable. So this is us giving a round of applause to arrays for helping make our work easy. Now, there are different ways you can store an array. So just to go over quickly, in this example, I mean, we'll see how we could do this with an array. So normally the way we know how to do things right now is if we wanted to store all of this, we'll store all the different movies in different variables. Okay. Now, just to quickly show how you can do an array, you can do an array with an array constructor, and then you can do it with a literal notation. We'll go more over this when we are writing out arrays. So back to the example of movies, instead of doing movie one, movie two, movie three, we could just store all of them in an array called movie. So if I open up this, and if I get rid of this, and maybe let's do colors. So for example, if you wanted to do colors, we could do color one is equal to red, color two is equal to blue, and so on and so forth. We could keep doing this forever. We could, anytime we have a new color, we could store it in a new variable. But then instead, we could just use an array. Array allows us to store a group of things. So we can store different things in a collection. So instead, we could maybe have const colors, and we could store them in an array. Now, the way you do an array is you could just use a square bracket notation. You could just use a square bracket. So when we do this, we are initializing an array. Or we could use what we call a constructor, but you really have to do a constructor. So you could do a new array. So this is just that we are establishing a new array because JavaScript already has an array. So we're making a new copy of that array. So it's a constructor. But most times you just do like a literal. So you just use a square bracket. So when you do a square bracket, it means you are creating an array. So, and we could store them. We could do red. We could do red. We could do blue. And we could store as many colors as we want to. So that is what we use array for. Arrays allow us to store a collection of things. And the thing about arrays is that they can store they don't have to store the same data type. So we are storing a string here. We could store a number. We could do like 10. We could store booleans inside. So we can store different things of different data types. They don't have to be of the same data type. At least that's one of the things JavaScript allows us to do. So arrays allow us to store things. We can store things of different types. We could even store an array inside an array. So we could have like an array inside this array where we are storing maybe, I don't know, maybe teams. So maybe, I don't know what we can store. Maybe we can store the sun. We could store like different bodily things. So we can store sun, moon, and things. So our array, we like to call them toasters. You can throw things inside there. You can store different things inside there. So usually when you want to store a group of collections, instead of storing each of them in a variable, you can store them in an array. And like you see, most times because array is storing a lot of things, the variable name is usually plural, but that is just a convention. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. So just to go a little bit more about arrays, like we're saying, so we can, the same way when we're doing variables, we could access the variables by using the variable names. So for example, when we did name, when we wanted to use name, we could just console.log the name. It's the same way we can do with arrays. When we store things in arrays, we can access them. We can access them by their index. So what I mean by their index is their position. So we can access them by their position. Now, the way we know is that the first thing is in index 0. So if we were to console.log colors, and we want to access what is in index 0, so we use a square bracket. We're trying to access what is in position 0. If we were to run this, we can see that what is in position 0 is red. So if we look here, red. So we can access things in the array by using their index. And always remember that arrays are 0 indexed. So they start from position 0. So you could do 0, 1. So if we log what is in position 1, we should get blue because blue is in position 1. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Same way we do. If we wanted to just grab something and store it in a variable, we could do it the same way. So for example, if we wanted to const thing in position 1, we could take that and store it in a variable. So we could do colors. We want to store the thing in position 1 inside a separate variable and maybe use it for something else. So if we console.log, so I'm grabbing what is in position 1. If we console.log things in position 1, we should see that we could see that it's blue because blue is what is in position 1. So we could grab things from an array and store them in individual variables if we want to. Does that make sense? Any questions so far about arrays? Okay, any feedback so far? Does it make sense? And please, I don't want it to be like a lecture where you come where I just speak and you go. I mean, ask questions if you want. If you have anything you want to add, feel free to add it. Okay, great. So each element in an array can be accessed with an index. We said that arrays has 0 index. So the first thing is in position 0. So we start counting from 0. We don't start counting from 1. Most things in programming, you start counting from 0. You don't start counting from 1. So you could access things in this. Now, if you wanted to add to an array, there are ways that you can add to an array. So for example, if we wanted to add something different, if we wanted to add a new color, we can use the dot push method. So push allows us to add things to the array. So if we wanted to add a new color, we could do colors. We could do colors dot push and whatever we wanted to add. So let's say we wanted to add, maybe we wanted to add a name. So we wanted to add Kobna to the array. So colors dot push. Now, if we were to console.log our colors, our array, console.log, what's happening? Console.log. If we log out our arrays, we can see that now Kobna has been added. So we can use the push to add things to the array. So we can continuously make changes to the array, add things to the array. So push is the way that you add things to the array. You could specifically add things in a particular position by the index, but not to worry about that right now. So the way you can add to an array is to use the push. Now you can also remove things from the array. So if we wanted to remove the last thing from the array, we use what we call the pop method. So we want to pop it. So if we do colors, the pop, it should remove the last thing from the array. So I mean, if we pop it, let's run, and I'm still console.logging the array. So if we were to run this, if we were to, let me pop the array, let me log it again. So if we were to run this again, we can see that now it has removed Kobna. So by using pop, we can remove the last thing in the array. So if we wanted to remove the last thing in the array, we'll use a pop. If we wanted to add something to the end of the array, we use a push. So push and pop do the opposite things. Pop, it pops it. Or do pull and you remove it. Push, it'll push you into the array. So it'll push it to the end of the array. Now we can do the same thing to the front of the array. So if we wanted to move something to the front of the array, we can do what we call on shift. So in the same thing, if we wanted to move something to the front of the array, we could do colors dot on shift. So maybe we wanted to add, and let's name the applet. Let's name it first. So if we console.log colors again, and we run it, we can see that now it has added first. And let me just comment out these ones so that we don't see them again. So if we run it again, we can see that it has added first. to the beginning. So we can add things to the beginning of the array using onShift. So we're telling the people in the front, they might think disconnect. Okay, sorry, it cut out for a minute. We're telling the things in the front to unshift themselves. So we can add things to the front of the array with the unshift. In the same way, like we can use pop to remove things from the end of the array, we can use what we call shift. So we can use shift to remove things at the beginning of the array. So if you wanted to remove something at the beginning of the array, we can use what we call the shift method. So if, let me just copy this. So if I wanted to remove what is on the front of the array, I can use the shift method. So if we shift the array, we can see that now blue is fair. How many things did I shift? Okay, I think I removed something first. So if we do the shift, we can see that now it has removed. The reason this one is not showing is because I commented it out. But if we run it again, we can see that now it has moved red to the first. It has unshifted this and it has moved. So we can remove things at the front of the array using the shift. We can move things to the front of the array using onShift. We can remove the things at the end of the array using pop. We can add things to the end of the array using push. Same way, if you remove them and you want to save them in a variable, you could do, for example, if I remove the thing at the beginning of the array and I wanted to store it separately, all I could do is maybe put this thing in a variable. So const new thing equals this. So whatever I shift from the beginning, I can store that in an array. So right now, if I should console or log new thing, what we are removing from the end, we can save it somewhere else and use it for something else. So if I do Node.js, we can see that now the value of it is first because that is what we are removing from the array. So these are some of the array methods. These are ways you can add and delete things. These are ways you can add and delete things from the array. Can you still hear me? My mic is not going off, so I don't know if you can still hear me. Can you guys hear me? Okay, I think you can hear. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, great. I don't know, my mic wasn't going off, so I figured you couldn't hear me. So I don't know the last thing you heard, but I was just going over. I'm saying that so this we can use the bracket to the literal arrays to establish an array. So if we want to do an array, we can just use the square brackets. Then we have created an array and we can store things in it. If we wanted to add things to it, we can use the push. So push will essentially push things into the array. If we wanted to remove the last thing in the array, we can use pop. So if we do a pop, it will remove the last thing in the array. Same way, if we wanted to move things to the front, we can unshift it. So we can unshift things to the front. If we wanted to add something to the beginning of the array, we'd use unshift. If we wanted to remove something at the beginning of the array, we can use shift. So those are some array methods that we can use. Now, the other thing is slice. So we can slice into the array. So for example, in our colors array, if we wanted to slice into it, so we wanted to take part of it, what we can do is use the slice method. So if we did the slice, and let me comment out all of these. If we use the slice, and let me clear the terminal. So let's say we have this array. Maybe let me just add more things so that we can slice it and we see people. Music. So we can slice into the array. When we are slicing, we can take part of it. So we can use the slice method. So if we colors and we use the slice. Now the thing about slices, you have to specify where you want to begin from and where you want to end from. So let's say we want to slice the array. So we want to slice it from index 2 and want to end at index 5. I don't know if there are a lot of things. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, let's add. Okay, let me just make this smaller because we don't have a lot of things in our array. So I want to slice the array. Now, if I console if I console.log this, we can see that our array has been sliced. So it has been sliced. We have the thing at the second index and the thing at the fourth index. So we can slice the array and get part of it. So if we wanted to slice the array, get part of it, we can use the slice method. So the first one is where we want to start from. And the second parameter is where we want to end. So we're saying we want to start from index 2 and we want to end at that. So in our array, this is what is our index 2 and this is what is our index 4. So the thing is, it doesn't get to the last. So if we say we want to end at 4, it will do the last thing before 4. So in this instance, this is 0, 1, 2. So we are starting at 2, 3. Because this is the fourth one, it will end here. So we get 10 and 2. So that's the way we can slice into the array. I like to, the way I think about it is, yeah, actually slicing into it, like you slice into bread. So you want to take the beginning of the bread and wherever you're cutting. So that's how you can always remember slice. There are lots more array methods. Okay. So in the same way, please do the array methods make sense? There are so many array methods. In today's readings, the ones I added, there are so many. I mean, we'll use some of them as we go on, but there are some that is probably best for you to look at yourself. So I've added links to it at the end of the slides. But do they make sense? So these are some ways that we can add things and remove things from the array. Now, the other thing is the same way we can, when we're doing the loops and stuff like that, we can also loop over an array. So we can use the same loops we were doing to loop over an array. So if we wanted to go over an array, for example, in our colors array, if we wanted to loop over it, we could loop over it. So we could, in the same way, let me just check what things is left in the array. Okay, so let's just add let me check the array. Let me check if we've removed everything or we still have things in it. Because I've deleted some of the things we just did. Okay, so we have an array. We have an array. We can loop through the array the same way we're doing the loops. So when you understand loops, you most likely every time you want to do iterations, the same type of loop I mean, they are more advanced. They are different loops, but fundamentally they are all the same. So when you understand the way loops are working, you can learn other loops and use it. So as we said, when we wanted to use loops, we can use the for loop. So first thing we have the for, we have the beginning condition. So we can do let I equal 0. I mean, we always use I but you can use anything. So this is our beginning condition. Then how long do we want to keep running the loop? So we want to keep running the loop while I is less than colors. Colors is the name of our array or length. So we can get the length property like the same way we can get string length. So we're saying that we want to keep running the loop while I is less than the length of this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So in essence, we can just write while I is less than 6. But the reason you want to write this is if you add new things so that the loop will keep running. Because if I state verbatim that's 6, when I add new things, it means that every time I'm looping over the array or ignore anything above 6. So if I do colors.length, it means that I want to keep running this loop whilst I is less than the length of the array. Then what do I want to do every time I run the loop? I want to increment I, so I can just do I plus plus. So let's say every time we run over the loop, let's say all we want to do is we want to console.log what is at that index. So we can just do colors. So we are saying that every time we run over it, we want it to console log what is at that position. So the first time we run it, I will be 0. So here will be 0. The next time we run it, I will be 1. So it will keep running, but we're using I just so that it will be changing itself as it is running. So if we were to run this, and let me get rid of this so that, and let me clear. So we can see that if the first time it loops, it runs red because here will be 0. The next time it runs, we can see that it's logging blue because now here will be 1. Now we can see that the next time, so you can loop through an array and do things with it. So I can, right now I'm just console logging it just so that we see, but you can use it for something else. You can do things in the array. So you can loop over it. First time we run it, I'm console logging red because that is what is in this position. So first time we run here will be 0. or check what is in position 0 is red, it will log it. Next time we run, here will be 1 because we are incrementing it. We said every time it runs, add 1 to it. So now here will be 1. When it runs again, here will be 2. It will keep running 3. Then it will continuously be checking this. So if now I is 3, it will check is I less than the length of the color snow. So it will keep running until I is less than the color of the length. So I mean, the way you know if I is less than, as soon as it becomes 5, if the next one is 6 and the colors dot length is also 6, it means that it won't be less than this. It will be equal to, so it will stop running. If you wanted it to run till it was equal to, you could just additionally add less than or equal to 6 and stuff like that. Yeah, does that make sense? I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, does that make sense? So that is one way we can loop over arrays and do stuff with them. I mean, the other way you could do it, you could do the same thing with what we call the for of loop. So it's the same thing. You just have this, then you declare your variable for const. This is probably, when you're looping over arrays, this is probably easy to understand. Then you have the name of your variable. So let's call it color, then of colors. So we are saying that for of colors, so for every color, I mean, I'm naming a color so that it makes sense, but all we are saying is that for every item in this array, so this is the variable and this is array, we want to do something with it. So again, we could console the log the same thing. We want to console log color. So we're saying that for every item in this, we want to, you could also just name it I. It doesn't really matter. So for I of colors, we want to console the log I. So if we run this, it should hopefully give us the same thing where it's logging red, blue thing. I mean, maybe we could make it fancy because we just learned about template lecture, so we could do something. This item is, and because it's a variable, we could do this. This item is this. So if we log it, save, let me clear. And if we log it, so first time it runs, this item is red. So because I will be red. Second time it runs, this item is blue. This item is 10. This item is people. Does that make sense? Do we understand looping over array? So the first way is, maybe I shouldn't, let me just comment it out just so that for anybody who wants to refer back to it. So so the first one is just the traditional for loop. You have the counter, you have the initial thing, you have the condition, and you have the increment. This is another way you can loop over an array where const, you declare a variable, then you can call it this, maybe just call it, because everything is, I mean, they're all no colors, so I guess it's better to name them. Does that make sense? Okay, so you could, if you want to loop over an array, you could just use a traditional for loop. You could also use the for of loop. So const color. So here will be the name of what you want to call it, then the name of what you're trying to loop over. So you can call this anything, but this has to be the name of what you are trying to loop over. So here we're trying to loop over colors and want to call it color. So because we've given this the variable, we can just continuously use it. Okay. Now there are other ways of iterating over things. That's what we call the for each. It's another loop, but they are, I mean, higher functions. It's just the way you can, but not to confuse you too much. I mean, I put it here if you want to go over and look on it. I mean, for example, the reduce is more apt if you're trying to do like mathematical things. So for example, if this thing was numbers, let's say this was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I mean, and we wanted to sum it. We could still use the same idea to sum it. So let's say sum. So let's declare a variable called sum. Sum is equal to 0. So sum is equal to 0. And every time we loop over, we want to sum plus equal. So when you do plus equals, it's essentially like doing sum is equal to sum plus whatever. So I'll just, okay, let me just leave it sum plus I. So I'm saying that every time I loop over this, I want to add whatever I is. I want to add it to this. Let me change this to numbers, just so that it makes more sense. And let me change this to numbers. Numbers. And let's name this one number, so that again your variable name can be anything. So number. So and number. So I'm saying that every time I loop over this, every time I loop over my numbers array, I want to add what the current number is. I want to add it to 0. So the first time it loops, number will be what is first. Then you loop again, what's the second. So if we were to run, if we console.log sum, and maybe let me also console.log the number so that we know what number it is every time. It is console.log number. So if I clear this, if we run this, sorry, it says, okay. Constant variable function. I say, oh, sorry. So like I say, if you use const, you can't reassign it. So I have to use let. When we're doing how to assign variable, we say when we use const, you can't change it to something else. So in this instance, using let is the better option because we want to continuously be changing it because we want to add new things and keep changing it. So if I run this, we can see that the first time it runs, I is 1. And so we can see the difference because they're like the same thing. But yeah, no, so we can see. So the first time it runs, I is 1, then I is 2, I is 3. Then at the end, we can see that the sum is 28. So if it means if we add all this, we can. So we can use the same idea of loops to like loop over an array and do things with it. In this instance, they are numbers, so we are adding them. Yes. Does that make sense? So if we wanted to use traditional for loops the way we're doing, it's just the same idea. So we could do for again your beginning condition. So we can let I equal 0 and 0. Then while I is less than the length of our array, so numbers to length. And when you get used to it, you almost always write it the same way. So every time we run over the array, our condition is we want to increment it by 1. So we can do sum plus equals. Every time we want to add, and in this instance, we can just use I, because every time we run it, we want to add, no, sorry, we want to add numbers. We want to add whatever is in numbers I. So every time we run it, whatever is in the numbers position of I, we want to add it to sum. So first time it runs, what is the numbers position 0 is 1. So we want to keep adding it. So if we console.log as sum, we can see that the sum is 28. So we can do that. Any questions? Yeah. And I mean, I just wanted to also like give you a taste of like this higher order function. So we could do the same thing with the filter, but don't worry about it. Don't get confused. Get used to writing regular functions. So reduce is just the higher order function. So it takes in like 2 parameters. So A, B. So we could just do A plus B, then 0. A plus B 0. It will just do the same thing that we can do with a traditional function, but it's just probably easier if you want to do like additions. So if we were to let's save this in a variable so that I can easily console log it. Apparently I can't spell. Const sum2. If we console log this, it will just do the same thing that our traditional for loop did. So sum2. We can see that it's also logging 28. So this is just an example of when I say higher order functions, they are functions that take in other functions. So sometimes if you want to do some things, you could just use a traditional for loop, but there are other functions that have been introduced, or there are other loops that have been introduced that probably do it simpler. So for example, like the reduce, I could do all of this in like one line. But yeah, don't worry about that. Get used to writing regular loops, like looping over stuff. Loop over everything. So when you get used to it, you can learn about other things. But just for reading purposes, I added the links to it. So let's just code over this. I had an array example in the follow along material. So let's just do that. Then we can call it a day. So I'll close all these. But any questions so far? I mean, people have been very quiet today, so I don't know whether it's getting over you or you're cool. But in and and I'm sure you can code right now. So I'll just put like 2 minutes on the, or maybe 3 minutes. Then let's try and do this. Then we'll come and do it together and we'll call it a day. So I'll put like 3 minutes on the clock. And let me pull this up. So essentially all you have to do is the first task is to create an array of colors with at least 3 colors. So create an array with 3 colors in it. Then using the array from above, store the first color in a variable. So grab the thing at the first index and store it in a separate variable. Then get the length of the array and store it in a separate variable. And also get the last element. Yeah, so I mean, I'll just put like 3 minutes. I mean, just give it your best shot. We'll do it together. But at least it's good you try first so that when we do it together, it's easy to see me do it. But if you do it yourself, so 3 minutes on the clock, try and get as far as you can. Then we'll do it together and we'll wrap up for today. Okay, let's just do this together. And let me just open this in the browser. So open. Okay, so I just open this in my browser. And if I inspect, okay, just so that we can do it quickly and run away. Okay, was anyone able to get through it? Thumbs up if you tried at least. Okay, so the first one says we should create an array with at least 3 values. So as always, just because it's colors, we can just aptly call our thing colors. So we said the way we set up an array is by using the square bracket. Now we can directly store things in it. So let's do red, and let's do yellow, and yellow, and then we can do green, showing the Ghanaian in me. So this is our array. Okay. Now it says that using the array from above, we should store the first color in a variable. So let's call our variable maybe first element. And then we said the way we can grab things from an array is by using the index. So we can do the colors, the array, and grab the first thing using the index of 0. So if we console log first element, if we console.log, what's my okay, if we console, I don't know if you guys can see, but if we console.log, you can see that the first element is red. How can I zoom into this? Okay, if we can see that the first thing is red, so we can use our indexing to grab it and store it in variables. So we can see that the first thing is red. Now it says that we should get the length of the array and store it in a different variable. So we said the way we can get the length of an array is by using the .length property. So let's store it in a variable length of array. Then the way we get it is the length.length. So we can do colors dot length. Now, by the way, when I did dots, you can see all the things that came up. These are all examples of array properties and methods that are available. There are so many. You don't have to immediately know or have or fail. Sometimes when you need one and you are trying to find, you can always look it up. But these are all examples of ones that we can use. So we want to get the dot length. We want to check the length of the array. So if we console, let's log it so that we can see. If we console length of our array, we expect to see 3. So we can see the length of the array is 3. So we can grab that and we can store it in a variable so that we can use it. Does that make sense so far? Now the last one was, let me move it because I've made my screen smaller. Let me just make the comments multi-line so that you can see everything. Okay, so get the last element in the array and store it in a new variable. Now, in this thing, it's simple. So I could say maybe const last element, last element equals, I know that the array is only 3 things. So the last element obviously is 2 because we said array is 0 indexed. So this is 0, 1, 2. Now if we console.log last element, we can see that it is green. Now, if the array was very big, like if you had a big array where you can't know the last thing, you can obviously do this. This is not feasible. So the way you can do it is you can use the length of the array. So length, we've already grabbed the length of the array and stored it in a variable. So I'll just use that variable length of the array -1. Now, if we console.log this, we still get green. Now, the reason this works is that we said that arrays are 0 based. So it means that it starts from 0. So whatever the last index will be will obviously be in this example, because we had 3, So it will be 3 minus 2. So the whatever the last thing will be 2. So if we use the sorry. So if we use length of array minus 1, we are going to grab the last thing in the array. So again, just to reiterate, in our simple example, because the things are 3, 1, 2, 3, the length of array is 3, minus 1 will be green because 0, 1, 2. So that's an easy way you can grab the last things without having to specify, because if you have a big array, you can't know what the last element is. So you can do the length of the array minus 1. So here we store the length of the array. We know that if we subtract 1, we are going to grab the last thing because our array is starting from 0. So we can subtract 1 and grab the last thing. Does that make sense? And I'll put this in chat for anyone who wants to review it. Okay. Okay, any questions?
Yeah, Cornelius, I don't know if you already explained this, but I see that when you are creating variables, like you use cap locks somewhere in the middle, like for example, like the first element, the big E is the element starts with a big E. Is there any reason?
Oh, yes, yes. So for this, for example, I start this one with a small letter and I start
Oh,
with,
yeah.
yeah, it's called camel casing. So camel casing is
Oh,
just
yeah.
it's just a convention for writing like variables. So usually, I mean, you could do like this. You could do first underscore element. Uh,
Oh,
so usually there are different ways you can name your variables, but the normal convention is to, or the convention most developers use is what we call the camel casing. So camel casing is where the first word, if you have like words that are combined, like this first element is two separate words. The first
yeah.
word begins with a small letter, but every word that comes after begins with a capital letter. So if I had more words, it would be first element of the
Um,
array. So it's just camel case and it's just a convention for writing variable names. I mean, it won't make your code any different, but it keeps your code clean if your variable names are consistent, but it won't affect your code anyway. So
well,
if I did first element, it will still work. It won't change anything, but it's just a cleaner way of like writing your
oh,
variables. Yeah, it's called camel casing. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so just to quickly recap the things that we've learned today, and I'll close this. I'll open this and I'll open this. Just to and please, I mean, when I put things in here, I hope that you read them. It's for your own benefit. And because I mean we can't cover every single thing in like class because we only have 2 hours together. But then I mean we try to do all the fundamental things, but then this reading is just to like help you like solidify your understanding. If you have any confusions, I mean you can ask, but hopefully when you read the articles, and most of them have like examples there that you can try, because we said the only way we're going to get good at writing code is to write more code. So please, I don't put it there for fun, and I don't like do the research to add them just so that the slides will be a lot. It's something that will hopefully help you. So I mean, today we went over logical operators. We spoke about conditional, so how we can do things based on different states. We again looked at functions. We looked at arrow functions. We looked at traditional functions. We looked at loops. That was like our main thing. We looked at loops, how we can do things over a number of times. So if we want to do things repeatedly, we learned about how we can use loops. And then we looked at arrays. We said arrays are for storing a collection of items. So we said arrays, we can store different things in an array. We can store things of different data types. So rather than storing everything in multiple variables, if they are related things, we can store them in an array and we can use their indexes to grab them and use them for different things. So I hope we learned something. I hope it was a good class and thank you all for joining. As always, I upload the videos on the YouTube. Please take time and watch. I know it's probably long, like 2 hours, but then sometimes maybe we'll go over things quickly. I mean, I always watch the videos back myself just to see something that I said, if it makes sense, how I can rephrase it. So in the same light, I don't expect that things that I say will click immediately. Great if it does, but if it doesn't, watch the videos again and hopefully you can hear something that you might have missed, or maybe gain a better understanding of things that you didn't grasp while we're together. So we're right on time. Thank you all for joining. I'll see you all on Tuesday. I'll share the slides on the class page. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thanks. Bye bye.